On this edition of Sightings, deep within Colorado's Black Forest, something is disturbing the solitude of Steve and Beth Lee's Rocky Mountain retreat.
We came home and it was like the 4th of July in our living room and in our bedroom.
A Sightings investigation provides some answers. Then, could this man have discovered proof of intelligent life on Mars?
You realize how fantastic all this sounds.
Yes.
Laylee Hayslip knew that her brother's spirit would not be still until she found and buried his remains. Sightings goes to Vietnam, searching for the spirit of a restless warrior. There's further proof of a dramatic UFO encounter over Iran.
It can be any technology to be like that is only UFO.
And first there were crop circles. Now Sightings uncovers the mystery of the sand rings.
Welcome to Sightings. I'm Tim White. When the Lee family of Black Forest, Colorado contacted Sightings, it was their last resort. The Lees were exhausted, both emotionally and financially. They'd spent everything they had trying to cope with the terrifying haunting in their rustic mountain home. When Sightings saw photographs the Lees had taken of the supposed entity, an investigative team was quickly dispatched. With the majestic Rocky Mountains as a backdrop, Black Forest, Colorado seemed like a picture-perfect destination for Steve and Beth Lee. For 5 years, the Lees rented homes in the area until they decided this was the place they wanted to set down roots. Strangely, as soon as they made the commitment to stay, the paranormal force wanted them out.
We came home and it was like the 4th of July in our living room and in our bedroom. We had all kinds of lights flashing through. We would hear people walking, or it sounded like people walking across the roof. We would lay in bed at night and hear chains dangling. One night we woke up and we heard orchestra music. Just strange things started happening.
The Lees did not immediately assume that this was the work of a ghost or a poltergeist. They searched for a conventional explanation. A sophisticated burglar alarm was installed. Security cameras surveilled their property. Beth hired private investigators and queried state and federal agencies. So far, these efforts have added up to more than $30,000.
We've basically used all of our savings. We've used all of our things we ever invested. We've used the college funds, the whole works, trying to figure this out.
The Lees have been gathering an impressive body of evidence that some strange force is at work here. There are audio tapes of inexplicable noises, statements from multiple eyewitnesses, and bizarre photographic images.
Things started coming out in the photographs, and which I thought it was a light leak and, camera messing up. So that's when I changed cameras and started taking a lot more pictures. I took a picture right over against my wall, and when we got it back, it had some fog in it with an image it looked like of a face. I'm getting the same image in the fog outside the house and in front of the house and back, no matter where I take it.
The images contradicted the Lees' belief that the disturbances were caused by electronic interference, atmospheric conditions, or intruders. These photos convinced them to search in a new paranormal direction. When Steve Lee contacted Sightings for help, we called in longtime photographic consultant Edson Williams. Williams is an expert in creating special effects on film. He is trained to detect trick photography.
Of all the pictures I saw, this is certainly one of the most curious. It would be difficult to recreate that dot on a single exposure. This dot caught my eye because this is the only instance where there's both a hazy aberration and a very sharp dot. And also these are indoor. This is the first and only dot I've seen that was inside the house. This image was probably the most interesting of all the images to me. It has a light beam that seems to be emanating from the ceiling. It has a slight glow around the top, and the light has a slight bend to it, which also I thought was very, very interesting. As it comes down, it gets a little thicker and has about a 5 or 6 degree bend midway through the beam.
If this is not trick photography, what is it? Sightings offered to send an investigative team to Black Forest.
I'm kind of at the point now where I have the best in the field saying, we don't know. And so that's why y'all are here, because we're kind of at the point now where, you know, if we have to accept it as paranormal, I guess we will.
The investigation focuses on 3 areas where activity is most pronounced: an exterior wall adjacent to the Lee's satellite dish, the living room, and upstairs in the master bedroom. The sightings team brings in multiple cameras and highly sensitive wireless microphones. A second crew hired by the Lees records our team so they can learn how to conduct follow-up investigations. Psychic Echo Bodine has been brought in to locate paranormal hotspots, which we will attempt to substantiate with a thermal imaging system.
Any slight thermal changes the camera will see. We take the temperature information and convert it to color, and there's 256 different colors that we're displaying on the screen.
Less than an hour into the investigation, unusual interference completely wipes out the team's audio system. It coincides with Echo Bodine's first psychic impressions of a threatening force.
I sat down and I was trying to listen to him, and I became aware of several voices over here. And so I turned around, and there's a male spirit standing right there, right there.
In the precise place where Echo is pointing, thermal imaging reveals an anomalous hotspot in the rafters. The heat reads as light blue, while the rest of the ceiling area reads in darker, cooler blues and pinks.
He's responsible for the things that have happened, and he will continue to be responsible for the things that will continue to happen. He considers this to be his place, basically.
A few minutes later, an unseen force pushes a heavy video camera off its sturdy tripod.
What just happened with the camera?
Well, the camera was set up here on the tripod. It was locked in, and all of a sudden,
so you thought.
It just took a header right off the tripod and landed on this light stand here and bent it.
The camera is undamaged, and the investigation continues in Steve and Beth's bedroom. Here, Echo receives her strongest psychic impressions.
What I'm feeling is this room is absolutely full of spirits. This room attracts spirits from the past. This is not a restful place. This is not a restful room to sleep in.
Again, there is physical evidence of an unexplained intruder. A slow, hollow thumping is picked up by a police scanner in a corner of the bedroom. It's also picked up by the sightings audio operator and by Echo Bodine. It is unlike any kind of known electronic interference.
Steve turned on his scanner, and initially we heard that exact same noise, but now we're hearing something else, and it started out really slow. It sounded like sort of like footsteps, and now it's gotten a little faster, and this is how it sounds.
This is compelling evidence that some kind of physical disturbance is affecting the Lee home. But the force seemed to be most evident in the emotional effect it had on members of the investigator team.
I, for one, would like to get out of here.
In the living room, Echo is asking Beth to recall some of her feeling of terror and anxiety when the feelings return unannounced.
All of a sudden, I felt like something was just holding me, and it was cold, and I wasn't sitting, I wasn't standing, and I couldn't breathe. And I was lightheaded, and I feel just like that right now.
Yeah, like it's almost like somebody opened up a
they just
winter
kinda,
door.
But they're holding you and kind of going
again,
like
right here.
this.
Here, it's growing again.
Yeah.
It's getting bigger again. Unbelievable.
I have got to move for just a second.
It's really strong.
I've just got to get away from here.
Strong
Oh, wow.
presence here. Unbelievable.
With the emotions, there is more electronic interference. There seems to be a connection, and the team decides to move outside to the area between the living room's exterior wall and the satellite dish. It is here that the intersection of the physical and the emotional overtakes a member of the Lee's camera crew.
What's wrong, Sherry?
So that it'll release her.
I can't explain my arms. My arms feel...
It's going inside of her, is what Echo said.
It's in my chest, my chest, my arms.
Echo told her to keep saying, clear me now. Keep talking, keep talking. Come on.
I'm clear.
Let's get the bed again going.
Okay.
What is it?
All right.
What is it?
It's okay, Sherry, don't. Sherry, don't. It's just what they want you to do. Stay calm. Stay calm.
I want to go away.
It's okay. It's like it's an energy that's pulling on me. At the same time, it's pulling on her.
What is it?
As soon as she left the house, the terror subsided and was completely gone less than 24 hours later. It's a phenomenon that Echo Bodine believes is a direct result of the more than 20 restless spirits she believes are trapped inside this house.
On a 1 to 10 scale, it's a 10. The activity is monumental.
This preliminary investigation confirms what the Lee family has felt for more than a year. But more work will have to be done to determine why their home is being targeted and what it will take to appease the spirits here.
Mainly, I just want a normal life again and to get it past us and get on down the road.
Since our investigation, the unseen forces inside the Lee home have turned violent. Steve Lee recently sent us this photograph of a large scratch across his forehead. There was no scratch on the negative. The following day, as this home video shows, Steve developed a large, painful welt on his forehead. His doctor can't explain the cause of the injury. The Lees believe that this welt was caused by violent energy directed at Steve by an evil spirit within the house. They have agreed to update sightings if this strange phenomenon continues. And we will continue to update you.
Next, if there's life on Mars, is there a human connection?
I'm absolutely convinced we're related to other beings elsewhere in our galaxy.
There is, or was, life on Mars. This is the conclusion of many researchers who've studied NASA photographs of Mars transmitted by the Viking spacecraft. Several photographs show a face staring out into the cosmos. It seems impossible, but as correspondent Carla Wold reports, there are clues here on Earth that add an intriguing new dimension to the face on Mars.
Here in the countryside of south-central England, in a hamlet named Avebury, stand 5,000-year-old stone structures of unknown origin. There are also circular mounds built for a purpose no one has deciphered. But now, an intriguing new theory suggests that these mysterious monuments are connected to similar formations on the surface of Mars.
The complex on Mars is exceedingly important in my view because it's highlighted by the presence of the famous face on Mars, which acted as a beacon and probably attracted our attention to the whole area.
David Percy is an author, filmmaker, and paranormal researcher. He believes that this face is not a trick of light and shadow, that it's part of a vast complex of Martian structures created by intelligent life.
This is the whole of the complex. Over here to the west, we have an area which we call the city. And over here to the right is a crater. And beneath it, down here, a spiral mound. And over to the west, a pyramid which is five-sided.
In 1991, while researching the Avebury crop circle phenomenon, Percy made a startling connection.
I took an Ordnance Survey map of the area and superimposed it over the NASA photograph of the complex in its entirety and found that it matched.
The most striking match was made here, at the famous Avebury Circle.
It's about 1/4 mile in diameter, and around about 5,000 years ago, they shifted approximately 4 million cubic feet of material. One would want to ask why. My hypothesis is that this is a copy of the crater on Mars.
That's a big stretch for a lot of people to believe that this is the duplicate of something on Mars.
Sure.
How do you get there?
Well, this isn't the only item that we're dealing with here. We have just a short distance away Silbury Hill, It's the same relative size as a spiral mound on Mars and is the same relative distance to the crater. It would have taken about 700 people 10 years to build this. It was equivalent in effort to putting a man on the moon in the 60s.
Avebury Circle and Silbury Hill do bear an uncanny resemblance to their counterparts on Mars. But I found some of Percy's other theories harder to accept. David, I have to tell you that this, to me, looks like an ordinary country path.
Yes, I agree with you. It is, in fact, an ordinary country path, but it happens to be the analogue of the top ridge of the pyramids in the city on Mars.
But if you really want to see something, don't you think you'll see it? I mean, can't you be making things because you want it to fit your theory?
Yes, of course that can be done, and the people who look at this information have to see for themselves. You've got to explain, for instance, why that crater is positioned exactly where it is on this planet. It isn't at a random place. It is a very accurately measured point between the North Pole and the equator. If you draw a line from the wall down to the south to the spiral mound, and then up again to that tetrahedral rim pyramid, you get just under 19.5 degrees. If you do exactly the same thing at Avebury, you get precisely the same measurement. You cannot get such a correspondence just by wishful thinking.
How do you think it was created? Who do you think created it, and why?
Clearly, this complex on Mars that we're talking about was built by intelligent beings who went to Mars and built the complex because they were working on a project. And this project, in my view, concerned the emerging beings on this planet.
Percy believes that the extraterrestrials came to Avebury centuries ago to change the course of human evolution, and they conducted experiments in genetic engineering.
I believe they constructed the complex to undertake a genetic project that concerned the emerging beings on this planet. And I believe that that spot marks the birthplace of human beings, Cro-Magnon man.
Percy has found an unlikely ally for his bizarre theory in evolutionary researcher Stan Gooch. They have concentrated on the chain of human development, which made an unexpected and unexplained leap from Neanderthal man, who appears more ape-like, to Cro-Magnon man, who appears more human. How do evolutionists explain that?
Well, they don't. They just drop the subject. They say, well, we'll find the home site of Cro-Magnon man one day, and it doesn't really matter. They just brush it aside.
What do you think of David's theory, that in fact it was genetic interference from extraterrestrials that explains this?
I think the extraterrestrial theory is more likely than any, because why have we not found the home sites where Cro-Magnon evolved over periods of millions of years? That's what's required.
Why would extraterrestrials on Mars be concerned with our development down here?
Because they have always been concerned with our development. I'm absolutely convinced we're related to other beings elsewhere in our galaxy, and indeed in other galaxies too.
You realize how fantastic all this sounds?
Yes.
Do you worry that people will think you're crazy?
No, because I believe we will actually be able to go to that site and see the things that they were doing. I predict that when we go there, we will find out a lot more that will corroborate this unfolding story.
NASA agrees that the Viking space probe has made significant scientific contributions. However, they steadfastly maintain that proof of life on Mars is not one of them.
Next, what's behind Oregon's mysterious sand rings?
I believe that there are non-physical, non-terrestrial intelligence.
And who's watching for killer comets?
Now, here are some of the stories Sightings is following in the news. World-renowned alien abduction expert Dr. John Mack is facing serious charges from some of his colleagues at Harvard. They want him out. At Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, Pulitzer Prize-winning professor of psychiatry John Mack is embroiled in a fight for academic freedom, unprecedented in the school's 360-year history, all because of this book on the alien abduction experience.
I believe one has to expand our notion of the possible and the real to even begin to take this in.
Dr. Mack's book is a case-by-case study of his own patients' encounters.
It was a little gray being, and it seemed to be female just the way it was sitting.
As his book earned increasing publicity, a faculty committee began questioning Dr. Mack's psychiatric methods. Despite more than 30 years teaching at Harvard, Dr. Mack was threatened with expulsion.
The number of the people who have gone forward to work with me, with the media, in connection with my book, have in fact been threatened with loss of their jobs, and people have actually lost their jobs.
After a year-long investigation, John Mack was permitted to remain at Harvard, with the warning that his future studies must be, in the panel's words, more scholarly. Our island in space, our Earth, is threatened by giant chunks of galactic debris hurtling blindly through space. When the Shoemaker-Levy comet crashed into Jupiter in 1994, it was Earth's wake-up call. A congressional task force was formed to monitor the potential danger to our planet. But recently, the task force was disbanded. In a special issue of Astronomy magazine, editor Robert Burnham warns that this means there are now more people working behind the counter of one fast food restaurant than there are watching the entire cosmos for signs of impending disaster. The threat is real. Comets and asteroids have hit the Earth before. Craters range in size from just a few feet to over 5,000 square miles. According to Astronomy magazine, NASA researchers believe there are over 1,000 near-Earth objects large enough to cause a global cataclysm if they hit. However, fewer than 10% of them have actually been discovered. So the next time you go to your favorite fast food joint, count the number of people behind the counter. Then remember that your lunch order is getting more attention than target Earth. Along the rugged Oregon coastline, in this inaccessible cove, someone or something has left a calling card. And the message is strikingly similar to the one left in crop fields worldwide. But instead of corn or wheat, this message is written in the sand.
Who the circle makers are, I believe that they're a non-physical, non-terrestrial, very high-order intelligence.
Ilis is the national coordinator of the Center for Crop Circle Studies U.S. network. She has investigated dozens of inexplicable formations in farmers' fields throughout North America and has found a strong connection between crop circles and sightings of UFOs. In Hunk Point, Oregon, the formation of the sand circle was also connected to a UFO sighting.
This is the first time that we've ever had sand rings. Certainly on the beach, it's the first time in sand at all. There was a light seen offshore the night before the sand rings were discovered in the area here. This area is under the high water line twice a day.
Further study and more photographic evidence is impossible. As quickly as it appeared, the Hug Point sand ring was gone, washed away by the tide. We'll have more stories from the news next time. Now, here's what's coming up on Sightings.
Laylee Hayslip's book inspired Oliver Stone to make Heaven and Earth. Now, Sightings investigates the frightening story of a restless spirit that haunts her family. Later, Iran's top military command speaks out about a dramatic UFO encounter.
In 1992, when Laylee Hayslip returned to Vietnam after 20 years in the United States, it was as a technical advisor to director Oliver Stone. He was making Heaven and Earth, the true story of Laylee's coming of age during the Vietnam War. As Laylee watched her past unfold in front of the camera, it seemed strange paranormal forces were at work behind the scenes. She was a young woman when she left Vietnam as the bride of an American. Now, Laylee Hayslip returns to her homeland with director Oliver Stone.
This house here is not supposed to be there on the
Laylee's story will become the movie Heaven and Earth. And on this trip, she is guiding the cast and crew through her childhood village and introducing them to her family.
No, this way she remembers.
They are here to learn the details of Laylee's girlhood that will bring the film to life. It is a rare opportunity for actress Joan Chen to meet Laylee's mother, whom she will portray in the film. But another family member is conspicuously absent. His picture graces the family's altar. Offerings and prayers to him, the traditional Vietnamese rituals for honoring the dead, are performed regularly. The rituals are carried out despite the fact that no one in the family knows how Lê Le's younger brother, Sao Bon, died or where his body can be found. Drafted by the Viet Cong, Sao Bon vanished in 1963. He's not been heard from since, except in the supernatural visions of Lê Le's mother. Nearly 30 years after her son's disappearance, Lê Le's 84-year-old mother tells her daughter that Sao Bon has returned in spirit. She describes an eerie visit from a snake that followed her around the house. Then there was a sickness in the family that could not be treated, two traditional Vietnamese signs that a restless spirit is present.
Snake to us is a very symbolic. It's something is powerful, something that represents on the other side.
Lê Lê is unsettled by the possibility that Sao Bon is not at rest. This trip is no longer just about making a movie.
He's my mother's favorite son. We always feel like he's so there with us. Which is my mother very much aware that he's not happy with where he is right now.
He have come many times as a spirit, but just like a human body, just like a shadow, and have come to her many times. And sometimes let her know that he is present, and sometimes he didn't allow her to know that he's there, but he's there very often. She missed him so much, and so he came.
A proper burial in the family plot is essential if a spirit is to truly be put to rest. But Sao Bon cannot be put to rest until his body is found. The Vietnamese government has never contacted the family. Sao Bon is just one of the nameless, faceless dead labeled missing in action and forgotten by the Viet Cong. The possibility that he met with a violent end is inevitable and has serious implications for the family who survives him.
In the traditional Vietnamese worldview, if someone dies a violent death, then they become an unhappy spirit, and they can roam the earth forever.
Karen Fugelstad is a cultural anthropologist at Cabrillo College in Santa Cruz, California. She specializes in Vietnamese spirit lore.
Upon death, the most important thing to become is an ancestor. But if someone is not taken care of in the afterlife, or if they've died a violent or very traumatic or a young death, then they can't really become an ancestor. They wander around the earth as a spirit. Spirits possess living people if they're not taken care of in their afterlife.
The family believes their mother's recent illness is evidence of a spirit possession. When a medical doctor fails to diagnose her mother's illness, Lê Lê agrees to the traditional Vietnamese approach. The family goes to a psychic.
And the psychic said that his soul has to tell us that he wants to remove where it's right now. Usually it's not happy until it's buried properly.
The practice of communicating with the dead is a long-standing mainstream tradition in Vietnam. Westerners looking at this landscape, the Vietnamese warn, can only see a fraction of the forces at work here.
If you could actually see what the universe was comprised of in the countryside, then you would see living people going about the business of their everyday lives. But you'd also see spirits everywhere. You'd see spirits in the water. You'd see spirits in trees. You'd see spirits by beautiful rocks. You'd see ancestors hovering around every single house. And you'd see goddesses and gods and, you know, the spirits of ancient kings and queens. The countryside would just be, it would just be an amazing thing. You'd see spirits everywhere.
To help the earthbound see this full picture, psychics are an important part of every peasant community. Surprisingly, the psychic in Lê Lé's village tells her that there are 2 family members who must be found and put to rest, her brother Sao Bon and a female cousin who also disappeared during the war. He proposes finding both. The search begins the next morning. An hour outside of Da Nang, The psychic leads the family to a spot where he believes Laylee's cousin was raped and murdered 30 years ago. This man is believed to be a wizard. He uses divining rods to determine where the remains will be found. Family and friends dig into the soft earth until the wizard instructs them to stop. The psychic determines that these are the remains of Laylee's cousin and instructs the family to take them back home for burial. At sunset, the remains are buried in the family plot. Sticks of incense are lighted and prayers of thanksgiving are offered. The family is filled with a great sense of inner peace.
He's very grateful that helped him to relocate his sister. To him, he's very happy now. At least he have a peace of mind. Without our help, he don't know when it's gonna happen. But it happened today, and now it's over.
A storm is brewing, as if to remind the family that there is still a restless spirit among them. The following day, the family accompanies the psychic on a longer, more difficult journey into the past. They hope this road will lead to the remains, both earthly and spiritual, of their beloved Sauban. Although no tangible remains of Laylee's cousin were found, the family believes her essence was clinging to the soil and rock the psychic instructed them to take home. Laylee knew that her brother's remains might be found in the same way, but after 20 years of living in the West, she secretly hoped they might find something more.
Next.
I have a high hope to come here and find my brother's remains.
Dramatic new information brings Laylee a step closer to finding her brother's remains.
Laylee Haislip's supernatural odyssey began when she returned to Vietnam as technical advisor for Oliver Stone's movie Heaven and Earth. Laylee's mother felt that she was receiving disturbing visitations from the spirit of her son and Laylee's brother, Sauban. He'd been missing in action since the 1960s. With a Vietnamese psychic, the family traveled across the country in search of the remains of Sauban. It is a difficult journey over unmapped roads, across unnamed rivers, and deep into the Vietnamese countryside, where Viet Cong casualties were known to be very high. It is a route predetermined by the psychic's vision, and the route leads to an area where, locals tell the family, many Viet Cong were killed. Again, the psychic determines that spirit remains will be found here, and the wizard defines their exact location. The family begins to dig. Temperatures climb to over 100 degrees. A crowd gathers to watch the dig, but there is nothing to see. Again and again, the psychic and the wizard are drawn to this spot, but the earth yields nothing that can be named Sauban. The family is devastated. They had hoped to discover the remains of Sauban. They had hoped this was the end of the road.
Hope to come back here again and find him. I have a high hope to come here and find my brother's remains.
Again, the heavens seem to send a message. Don't give up, push on. This is the message the family hears in the wind. Back in Da Nang, the family turns to a different kind of spiritual intermediary, a man who claims that he is the medium for an ancient Vietnamese queen. In a trance state, the medium speaks with the voice of an old woman, a voice many people believe is coming directly from the spirit world. But just as Laylee begins asking about her brother, the session comes to an abrupt end. The local police are upset by the presence of a camera crew and arrest the medium. The family is frustrated once again. Laylee's first trip home ends with tears. She must return to the United States before she completes the task ordained by tradition.
There's no doubt Vietnam's full of unhappy souls. I think because Sao died during war, because he died a violent death, the place where he was killed would be a negative place, a place full of terrible feelings, and a place full of horror. It would be much more comforting, both to Sal and to his mother, if he was buried near the family. That would be much more comforting. It would be a much more secure place, and would be associated with all of those, wonderful feelings that people have about home and their family.
Was Saoban doomed to roam the earth, forever a restless spirit? 2 months after her return home, Lei Li received an encouraging message from Da Nang. Local officials had heard about the failed search for Saoban's remains. It inspired them to search old war records that had been locked away for more than 25 years.
Would the government behind us, and they go back to the records, it's old piece of paper. It's almost rotten. And they found that my brother's birth certificate, the day he joined the army, and the day he was killed. And dig back up and bring it out to prove it.
The authorities also found an eyewitness to Saoban's death, the Viet Cong doctor who signed the death certificate. Encouraged, Lei Li returns to meet the doctor, and he leads the family to the same area the psychic had led them before.
He found the place that the bloodshed. That is when he was wounded. So the psychic, he not 100% correct with the remains, but 50% correct.
The psychic apparently led them to the spot where Saoban was wounded. The doctor leads them to the spot where he last saw the body of Lei Li's brother. The doctor takes the family up a treacherous, overgrown mountain path to a cave. The Viet Cong had a makeshift hospital here. This is where many wounded soldiers were taken to recover, or to die. This is where the doctor buried Saoban. This time, the remains are not ambiguous. Human bones are found. A military official certifies that these are the remains of Saoban. Lei Li, the bereaved sister of a Viet Cong soldier and the wife of an American, is overcome with grief.
The whole time I was thinking, who was the person that killed him? Perhaps maybe I made love to that person, I fall in love with that person. I love that person, I hate that person.
And yes, me and my sister, we make a living by $1 of the U.S. In the same time, my brother wounded and killed by the U.S. Just so unfair.
Saoban is buried the same day in the family plot. His mother collapses at the graveside. Her son had finally come home.
Sometimes I have questions that is maybe somebody else remain and not my brother. If in that case, then we be haunted by my brother and haunted by the person removed. It's still very peaceful with everything, so it should remain. It's no question, it's no doubt.
Since the burial of Saoban's remains in the family plot, Lei Li's mother has stopped having her disturbing visions. For her family, decades of waiting and wondering are finally over. They're the lucky ones. It's estimated that more than 300,000 civilians and soldiers on both sides are still missing in Vietnam.
Next, one of Iran's most powerful generals breaks his silence about UFOs.
UFO exist, and they're trying to get contact with all of them.
Sightings recently reported on a 1976 confrontation between the Iranian military and a UFO. Well, since that report, 2 new witnesses have come forward to describe their roles in the historic event. After 20 years of silence, the former deputy commander and a lieutenant general in the Imperial Iranian Air Force are finally speaking out. As recreated in this Iranian television documentary, On September 19, 1976, an enormous UFO was tracked across Iran by the Imperial Air Force. In an exclusive sightings interview, former Imperial Air Force Generals Nader Yousefi and Mahmoud Sabahat described the tense scramble mission in which an F-4 fighter jet chased and attempted to engage the UFO. Now, for the first time in nearly 20 years, General Amir Kamyabipur, the second highest ranking officer in the Shah's Imperial Air Force, and his deputy commander, General Abdullah Azerbaijan, spoke exclusively to Sightings about what they believe happened on that historic night in 1976.
I had a statement from the pilots, I had statement from General Yousefi and also control tower. And having those calls from a civilian around the town, I was convinced that was a UFO. So this is how we went into investigation.
As far as my experience is concerned, it can be American airplane, it can be Russian, it can be any technology to be like that, except some super technology, which is only UFO.
General Azerbaijan conducted a thorough investigation into the bizarre events of September 19th. He sent his report to the Shah's military liaison and to Iran's U.S. military advisors. For the first time, he reveals what he told the U.S. military.
The highlight of the information that we gave to the U.S. government was, number one, we told them that the high rate of crime and high rate of extradition that we saw from the UFO was something which was not existed those days. Number two, this jamming capability to jam at such a wide range of frequencies.
Only a few government documents related to this incident have been declassified, but independent data corroborating Azerbaijan's account have been uncovered. A United States reconnaissance satellite was monitoring the skies over Iran on September 19, 1976, and recorded the movement of an unidentified flying object. Sightings has learned that the top-secret notation 238 scans indicates that the UFO event lasted more than an hour. The meaning of possible SR is still classified.
I don't have any doubt about UFO. UFO exist, and they're trying to find some way to get contact with our world. That is my feeling, and I am positive.
Important information about the Iranian UFO incident may be found in military files in Tehran. But since the ouster of the Shah, the military personnel in this report have been stripped of any privileges or access they were entitled to in Imperial Iran. Until further notice, the door to this case is closed.
If you've had a paranormal experience, please write to us at Sightings. Sightings can also be contacted at America Online at keyword Sightings. At the Sightings Forum, download images, sounds, and QuickTime clips. Also, join us daily in our chat room, live on AOL.
Until next time, remember, no mystery is closed to an open mind. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.
Next on Sci-Fi, Dark Shadows.
Are we dealing with an epidemic?
A bold experiment.
We recombine termite and mantid DNA to create a biological counteragent.
Becomes a deadly mistake.
They were designed to die. They are breeding.
But how do you destroy it? When you've created it. Mira Sorvino. Mimic. Saturday at 7 p.m. on Sci-Fi.